Tens of thousands of dollars and years of being in debt hang in the balance, yet the vast majority of us have only vague ideas of how we're going to pay down our loans. And that's with good reason. Weighing your options and doing the math when you have a single loan is complicated enough, let alone when you have multiple loans, which is the case for most of us. But no longer. Just 10 minutes with this one workbook is all it takes to create a clear and defined payment plan that can save you years off of your debt-free journey and thousands in interest. And you can then track and modify your plan over time. You can also use the workbook to weigh refinancing options as rates change. You can compare savings from different income-driven repayment plans, and it even includes a printable tracker that you can color in to track your journey in the physical space. So please join me for a tab-by-tab walkthrough. If you already have the workbook, you can consider this your instruction manual that you can skip around in as needed. If you're interested in buying the workbook, you can find it on buildwealth.tools or at the link in the description below. Now let's get into it. And first we have the Before You Begin tab. This is just a reminder that this workbook is estimates only, should be very close to what your lender is calculating, within 1 to 2%, but there will likely be some differences just because each lender can calculate things a little bit differently. This is not financial advice. It is just to help you come up with a payment strategy, track that strategy, and modify it over time. And next we have our Welcome tab. This will give you very high-level instructions, but it's most useful as a place to return to whenever you're trying to get somewhere in the workbook, because you can use this as an index and click through to see different things. So I want to call out that this orange color cell, it has this light orange interior and then a deeper orange border, indicates cells that you edit. So this is where you will enter information or click a drop down and select something. Any cells that are not orange are not meant to be edited or interacted with. And if you have trouble seeing these colors, please reach out and I will give you a version that's higher contrast to make sure that you're able to distinguish those. The other important note here is that dates are formatted American style, so it's month, then day, then year. And finally, if you run into any bugs or questions as you go, just reach out. I'm happy to help. All right, now we really begin. So this tab is where you're going to do all of your work. And that work starts by just entering your loans, and then you're going to do some planning around how you're going to pay those loans down. And here you can see the information that you'll need to gather for each loan. So you'll have to name each loan. That's just for your identification, so you can name it whatever you want. The start date. So that can either be the date the loan originated or the current date that you're at with the loan, but the balance needs to reflect that. So if you do your starting date, you want to do your original loan balance. If you're doing today's date and you've been paying it for a while, then you're going to do your remaining balance. APR, so what's your interest rate? This assumes that your interest rate is fixed rather than variable. Then we have your minimum payment. So this is the minimum amount you need to pay each month in order to pay off your loan within the amount of time that they gave you. So for instance, if you have a 10-year loan, then on the information for that loan, you will see an expected monthly payment. And that payment, if you pay it each month, then you will pay off that loan in 10 years. So that's your minimum payment. If you pay less than that, it's going to take you more than 10 years to pay it off. If you pay more than that, then you'll pay it off sooner. But our baseline is always going to be that minimum payment. That's where we're starting. And then we have exclude from extra payments. So you would only check this box if you're looking at a loan that you do not want to do any extra payments for. So this might be a loan where you're on track for forgiveness. So you don't want to bother giving any extra money to that loan because you're expecting it to be forgiven. So you want to just do minimum payments. So in that case, you would check the box. For any loans that you might want to pay down sooner, then you leave the box as is. Then we have some additional columns to the right. We will return to those shortly. First, I'm going to enter a few more loans here. You can do different start dates for each loan. So let's say you have some loans that are deferred or you won't have to pay on until later. Then you can do a future start date and no extra payments will be applied to that until it has started. And now that we have more loans in, we can look up top to see some information. And here we have interest saved and time saved. So these are our two biggest metrics when we're deciding between strategies and deciding how much extra money we want to put toward these loans on a monthly basis. And then we have our total payments. So this includes interest and principal. And this is our baseline. So if we pay just the minimum amount each month for all of these loans, Then by the end of that 10-year period, we will have paid just over $233,000. And then we have total extra payments. We haven't entered any yet, so it starts at 0. And then down here, we have that same information on a loan by loan level. So we have time saved and interest saved. We have the payoff date per loan. And then we also have these two columns here that are called priority order. And we can see that our Sallie Mae loan is priority 1. So priority 1 means that any extra payments that we plan will go toward our Sallie Mae loan first. Once that is paid off, it will then go to our priority 2 loan, which is our Federal Plus loan. Now, how is the priority order set? So by default, it is set according to debt avalanche rules, and that is simply from highest to lowest interest rate. So we can see Sallie Mae has our highest interest rate, our Federal Plus has our second to highest, and then our third is the Federal Grad Plus. So that's our default priority order, and we will look at other options in just a minute. All right, now we're going to scroll down. And before we look at the next section, I'm going to go ahead and hide this area here since we don't have any more loans, and this will just let us see more of this tab at once. And we're on to extra payments. So there's two different ways we can plan our extra payments. And the first one's very simple. It's just called an ongoing increase in our payment. And it just means that each month we'll put X amount extra toward our loans. So for example, let's say that right when we start paying our loans, we know that we want to pay an extra $500 a month toward our loans. That's our starting place. We don't want to do the minimum. We know we want to pay these down sooner. We want to save on interest. So we're going to right out of the gate start paying an additional $500 a month toward our loans. So for start date, we'll match the start date of all of our loans. We'll do the 1st of 2026. And for amount, we'll enter 500. So as I enter this, keep your eye on the top blue bar, and we should see our interest savings and time savings increase. We should see our total payment go down, and we should see our total extra payment increase because now we're making some extra payments. $500 a month exactly. So we can see that with an extra $500 a month from the start of our payments through the end, we will save more than $15,000 in interest, and we will save almost a year. So saving a year means that we'll be debt-free a year sooner. So we'll be debt-free in 8 years instead of 9 years. Our total payments decreased from $200,033 to $218,000, and this boils down the trade-off here. So if we do an extra $55,000, so if we pay that sooner, then we'll save almost $16,000. So that's sort of our return on that investment. And then let's say that in year 5 of paying down our loans, we expect to be able to put more of our extra money toward our loans. So we expect that by year 5, we will hopefully have gotten a raise or two, and then we want to put a bit more of that extra money toward paying down our loans that much sooner. So here I'll put the start date as 1/1/2031, and we will be able to pay, let's say, $700. So an additional $200 a month over that $500 we started with. So now we can see our time saved increased, our interest saved increased, we're paying a bit less overall, and our total extra payments increased. And then you can see this on a per loan basis. So we can see how much we're saving per loan, and we can see how much time we're saving per loan in months. So let's say as we go along, we're making extra payments each month, and it's the same amount per month. But then occasionally we have a buildup of cash. Maybe we have a tax refund, maybe an inheritance, maybe you scratch off a lucky lotto ticket. Then what you can do is you can log a one-time extra payment, and this will be applied to the loans just like the ongoing amount is, but it'll be just for a single month rather than ongoing. So let's say at the end of year 1, we look at our savings and we, for whatever reason, have an extra chunk of about $3,000 that we want to put toward our loans. So we can enter that here, and then we'll see how the dashboard up top changes. So now we're saving $17,000, we knocked off another month, and we're paying more in extra payments. If you need space, you can unhide those rows here. You'll just get this notification. Just check the box and click OK. And now we have these additional rows. So you have plenty of space to change your ongoing amount and to enter those one-time extra payments. And we have the same thing up top here. So if you have more loans, you can unhide and enter up to 20 loans. Now we go down to our final section, and this is where we determine our strategy. So we were just looking at how much extra money we want to put toward our loans, but the way that money is applied to our loans, which is that priority order we were looking at earlier, is determined here. And what we have on the right here is an estimation table that allows us to compare different pay down strategies. So on the left, let's say we're going to pay an extra $500 a month again throughout the life of the loans. So if we look at our loans, if we do debt snowball, then we would pay this one first because it's just $1,500. And then our next smallest loan would be this one. And then all the way up to our largest loan, which is $45,000. So snowball is based just on loan balance, completely independent of interest rate. And then we have debt avalanche. So debt avalanche, rather than looking at balance, is looking only at interest rate. So rather than going from smallest to largest balance, it's going from largest to smallest interest rate. So looking at our loans again, that would mean that we would start with Sallie Mae because it has over an 8% interest rate. And then we have our Federal Plus, which has a 7.5%. And then our lowest priority would be our lowest interest rate, which is our SoFi rate here, just under 6%. So we can see that doing debt avalanche will save us a month. We'll be debt-free a month sooner. It will save us an additional just over $3,000 in interest. So we see that it will save us more. And you may be saying debt avalanche saves us more. Why would I ever do debt snowball? Well, that's because we're all just humans and we can get burnt out from paying extra money on things like this because it's such a long journey. So it can be discouraging to pay extra for years and years before we see any loans actually get paid off. So this is why some people recommend and some people prefer debt snowball, because as you can see up here, if we started with our lowest balance, which is just $1,500, then we would have that paid off very soon. Within 3 months of $500 of extra payments, that loan would be gone. We would have one less loan that we're paying on. That sort of momentum is why some people prefer debt snowball, but this comparison table helps you see what that would cost you. So this is where you sort of decide what's it worth. But you do have one other strategy, and that would be a totally custom strategy. So you see the default priority order here for debt avalanche because that's the defaults. But if we select snowball, it'll show the snowball priority order here. Or we can set our own custom priority order. For example, we could say we're going to start by paying this off. This will be our first priority. And then from then on, we're going to go to debt avalanche. So the way you would do that is you would just change these numbers here. You want to make sure they stay sequential. Then down here, rather than selecting snowball or avalanche, you would select custom priority order. And just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to hide those rows temporarily so we can see how those strategies impact our top dashboard here. So if we do debt avalanche, we can see that our numbers didn't change because it defaults to a debt avalanche order. But if we go to snowball, we can see that it changes just a little bit. And you may notice that these numbers are a little bit different from these numbers. They're close. They should be within 1 or 2%, but they will be different because this comparison here, this is being done not on a line-by-line basis because that would slow down the workbook too much. So it's just doing an overarching formula, and it's going to vary slightly from the top bar, which is going to be more accurate. One other thing to note is if your loans do have different start dates, this strategy comparison is going to put them all at the same start date so it can do that calculation. And again, that will make a small difference between what you see in the top bar versus what you see in the estimation down here. Now we have one other setting. This is a very cool one. I think this is extremely underrated when we talk about our journeys to debt freedom. And here I'm calling it a minimum payment rollover because that's very descriptive. That's exactly what it is. So let's look back at our loans and we can see that our priority one loan has a $175 minimum payment. So this is our priority one loan and we're putting extra money toward it. So it's going to be paid off the soonest. So what happens once it's paid off the soonest? Typically is you no longer have that minimum payment. So your experience as a borrower is suddenly you're paying $175 less toward your debt each month. That can be nice. It's a little bit of extra money in your pocket. But if you're really committed to paying off your loans sooner and you want to save as much on interest as possible, then what you can do is you can say, hey, I'm comfortable making these payments. I've been making them for a few months or years. I can keep doing it. Then you can take that $175 per month and you can put it toward your priority two loan until that's paid off. So all these minimum payments roll over. So by the time you're on your last loan, you're paying just as much as you've been paying per month the whole time, but it's all going toward one loan. So you're going to pay everything off much sooner. So let's see what kind of impact that has. So right now we're saving 15,000 and we're saving a year and 4 months. So if we do minimum payment rollover, we're going to save 23,000, almost 24, and we're going to save over 3.5 years. So this is a very cool setting. I definitely recommend turning it on and off just to see what kind of impact it has, to see if it's something that you want to consider. It really just depends on how driven you are to pay off your loan sooner and how much you would benefit from having that extra money available per month. All right, quick recap. So we have our dashboard up top with our plan locked in. We're expecting to save this much time, this much interest. This is how much extra payments we're going to make over this 6-year and 2-month journey. And we're going to do a debt snowball in this case. And we're going to start with $500 extra toward our loan payments on day 1. And then on year 5, we're going to bump that up to $700 extra. And on the end of year 1, we're expecting to have around $3,000 extra we can throw at these loans. So this is our starting place. We can come back here and update it anytime. Next, we're going to see a bit more detail. And here we have our nice dashboard. So what will happen here is this will update each month with the assumption that you're making extra payments as planned. So I'm looking at this at the end of March 2026, and I set our loans to all begin on January 2026. So you can see that I should have made by now 3 total payments. 1 loan has been paid off. That makes sense because we're doing snowball. So we had that $1,500 loan that should be done this month. And then we can see that we're 3% done. We've paid down 3% of our principal. And then each month that you look at this dashboard, it will update automatically. If your plan changes, you can then go update that plan in the Create Your Plan tab, and then go back here, and it'll keep updating and stay up to date. So that's how it works on a high level. Now let's do a little tour of each piece. So first we have our projected debt-free date. So if we make those extra payments, we should be debt-free in June 2032. And then we have a countdown. So that's 6 years and 2 months from now. We have the total balance that we've paid so far. We have $170,000 in debt, just a little bit less than that. We have the number of loans we paid off so far. We have the number of payments we've made so far. And then here we have the next 2 loans that will be paid off. So we can see 1 loan will be done in 17 months. The one after that will be done in 33 months. We have a remaining balance breakdown. So we have $164,000 remaining. The vast majority of that is principal. 19% of that is going to be interest. Next, we have a split between our progress so far and then looking ahead. So we can see that we have made $1,500 in extra payments, which makes sense because it's been 3 months and we're planning to do $500 extra per month. So far, we've saved $463 in interest. So the way this is calculated, it's saying if we make no more extra payments for the life of these loans, we will have saved $463. So if we pulled the plug today, we said no more extra payments, this will still have been our savings. Our time savings so far is 0 months, and we have 1 loan done. And looking ahead, so this is saying if we continue on with our plan of making those extra payments we planned out, then we're going to make more than $90,000 in extra payments. That will save us an additional $23,000. That will save us just over 3.5 years, and we have 6 loans left. So this is our progress so far based on our extra payments. And then looking ahead with our plan, what the impact of that will be. Next, we have our debt-free timeline. So this orange bar represents where we're at currently. So you can see we're in March 2026. That bar is just going to move automatically each month. And then we can see remaining interest and remaining principal stacked on top of each other. And we can see our current plan laid out in one place here. We can see that they'll both decrease over time. It's getting slightly steeper. You can't really tell that. If you had higher interest rates, you'd be able to see that steepness change more visibly. And you can see this little bump here. So that's our $3,000 one-time payment. And let's just make that more pronounced for fun. Let's say we came into some money and we had a $20,000 one-time payment. You can see we have this big drop here. Then we have our payoff schedule on the right here. So you can see all the loans sorted from what will be paid off the soonest to what will be paid off last. And you've got a little check mark next to one, indicating that that one has been paid off. And here we have a breakdown of this month's payments. So this is meant to show you just in one place at a glance, what is the plan for this month? So if you want, you can open this workbook each month to see what you're planning to do. and then you can click paid just to sort of indicate when you've done that. You'll have to reset these each month, and then you can do it again the next month. So we can see that our extra payment is going to go to this loan this month for a total payment of just over $700. So this is where you would go each month for just the super simple snapshot of what are the payments I'm making this month in order to stay on my plan. And then here you have the remaining balance by loan. So from largest balance to smallest. And because we're doing snowball, we're going to be eating away at this one first and then this one last. So that's our dashboard. Again, this updates automatically each month, but it assumes that you are sticking with your plan. So if you have planned $500 in extra payments, it assumes you're still making those payments each month. And if you've planned some one-time extra payments, it assumes you've made those as well. As long as you're doing that, then this should stay very accurate. It should be within 1 to 3 percentage points of what's actually happening. But again, this is just an estimate. Your ultimate truth will always be what your lenders are telling you. Now you may be saying, I want more detail. I want to see an actual crosstab table instead of these visuals. Well, here we have our loan payoff schedule. So this is actually an amortization table, and this shows you your entire journey to debt freedom. So by default, it's going to show all your loans combined. So we can see the months that have already passed are grayed out. Our current month is highlighted in teal, and we see the beginning balance. So this is how much outstanding balance we have total across our loans. We have our total payment for the month. That's going to include this $500 extra payment. And then of the total payment, you can see how much went to principal and how much went to interest. And then we can see our ending balance. And if we scroll down, we can see our beginning balance decrease. We can see our principal paid increase. We can see our interest paid decrease, all things we would expect in an amortization table. And then we can see our final month. So this is the month where we would be debt free. This is our combined table. But if you want to look at a specific loan, then you just select that from the drop down here, and then it will update all of this information. So here we have our loan. It reminds us of our beginning balance in APR. It tells us how much principal we paid so far, how many payments we have left, and the payoff date. So we get that same information, but here it's just looking at a single loan, and we can select that for any loan, or we can select that for all loans together. And now we can see it shows our principal paid so far, payments left, payoff date for everything all together. Now you may be saying, I like this detail, but I want even more detail, and I want to be able to interact with it. Well, here we have our payment tracker. So as we move along these tabs, we get, from things that are essential, like creating your plan, having a dashboard so you can have a good sense of what's happening, to things that are very optional. So you may or may not want to see your amortization table in the last tab. And in this tab, you may or may not want to track very specifically each payment. But if you do, this tab is here for you. So up top, we have this dashboard. It tells us what month we're on currently, out of how many total months. It tells us how many payments we have logged this month. It tells us the total amount of those. It tells us the total amount of extra payments logged. And it tells us whether we're ahead or behind on our plan. This payment tracker is standalone. It does not impact the dashboard or our plan or any of the other tabs. This is just here for you to log your payments if that's something that's useful for you, or if you just like to see and have that satisfaction and that feedback as you go. And this does include your extra payments. So here our current month is in teal, and months that haven't come yet are grayed out. So we can see on month 1, we would have done $204, our minimum payment for that loan, $417, our minimum payment for that loan, $270, $503. And then this loan is our priority 1 loan. So we can see that that extra $500 is going to this loan, and then $326, $229. So we can see for that month, we did 7 out of 7. We didn't pay any extra than we had planned, and we didn't pay any less. So we're at 0 there. So we can see for the current month, this loan is going to be paid off. So that extra $500 is shifting to our priority 2 loan. So you can see that that loan increases and all the others stay at minimum, except for this one where we have our final payment and then we have our others. So now we can see this one is 7 out of 7 paid. We are right on track, not more or less. And we can see that reflected in the dashboard here. Here we have a printable tracker. This is meant to print well onto one sheet of paper, and this top bar will update over time, but everything else will stay static. So what do we have here? So up top we have, again, our dashboard. So we can see if we stick to our plan, this is what's going to happen. This is how much we're going to save. This is when we're going to be debt free. We have our time elapsed. So this is what you would color in. You have sort of the month here. So in August, you would make sure you've colored it in up to here. In November, you would have colored it in up to here. And then as each month goes by, you can check these boxes or color them in however you'd like, put a sticker on them perhaps. And then you'll see some boxes with a teal color. So that indicates that on this month, one or more of our loans will be completed. It will be paid off. So we can see that in year one, we will have paid off a loan. In year two, we will have paid off a loan. Nothing in year three, and then another in year four and year five. And this will accommodate up to 30 years. So if you wanted to throw a mortgage in here, you could. Now we have just a few more tabs, and these are more around sort of planning and education with different strategies. Beginning with, here we have your income-driven repayment calculator. So this is something you can do on federal loans. And if you want to learn more about it, I would definitely recommend looking at some resources that we'll show later in the workbook to get a bit of a baseline understanding before you use this. But the way this works is you're going to enter your annual income. You're going to enter your family size. You'll do your state, and you'll select your borrower type. And this is just based on when your first disbursement was. And these inputs will in part determine the federal poverty line for your area and your family size. And your AGI minus that poverty line is what will determine your minimum monthly payment. So once we have that entered, we're going to go down and identify which loans we want to consider for an IDR. And here we're going to indicate which of our loans are federal loans. So only federal loans are eligible for IDR plans. We're also going to indicate which of our loans are for graduate studies or graduate school. This distinction matters because IDR plans treat undergraduate and graduate loans differently. Some loans cap payments at different percentages or discretionary income depending on whether the loans are for undergrad or grad. And forgiveness timelines can differ too. And this is a good place to reiterate that all of this is not only pretty complicated, but it also changes a lot. While I was making this workbook, some rules changed mid-production, so I had to try to go in and accommodate those, but it just sort of underscores that this is a great calculator for getting a good sense of your options and what those might save you, but ultimately you're going to need to go to some official resources to really implement this stuff. So we're going to say 4 of our loans are federal and 1 is a graduate loan. So as we do that, we can see that our total balance here updates. So the total balance across those loans is $82,000. We can see our weighted average APR, and then we can see how much interest is accruing per month across these loans. That number will of course decrease as our balance decreases, but that is our starting place. And this is section 3. This is where the other 2 pieces come together. Up top, you can see the high-level math. We can see our AGI minus that federal poverty line, and that is how, again, we get our discretionary income, which is the number that determines our monthly payment amount under each of these IDR plans. The table below compares those plans side by side. The first column is our standard 10-year plan. That's our baseline. That's without enrolling in IDR. So that's if we make no changes. And then to the right, we have how much we would pay under SAVE, Payee, IBR, and ICR. SAVE was just ended by our current administration. I left it here because you never know. But as far as I know, that is not something that you can currently take advantage of. Now for each plan, you can see your estimated monthly payment, how long until forgiveness kicks in, and how much of your balance would be forgiven, and what you'd actually pay in total over the life of the loan under that plan. There's also a row showing your debt-free or forgiveness year and whether you'd need to monitor for negative amortization. Negative amortization is when your payment is low enough that your balance is actually growing instead of shrinking. And so it would grow if you're not paying enough to pay down your interest. The key trade-off to understand here is a lower monthly payment means you're paying over a longer period, which can mean more interest. But if the plan ends in forgiveness, you might pay less in total than you would with a standard plan. That's sort of the balance that you're striking here and what this table is trying to show. This table lets you see that trade-off so you can decide what makes sense for your situation. So again, this is just a starting place. What you see here may lead to you exploring one of these further and potentially enrolling, but you would want to confirm all of these numbers before you hit go. So we can see in our situation here, payee and IBR are expected to have the same impact. So we would have the same amount that we paid in total. We'd have the same forgiveness here. And then at the bottom here, we have a few additional considerations that you should keep in mind before moving forward with any of these plans. Now you might be saying, what about my private loans? Or maybe I'm not interested in IDR even for my federal loans. Well, our final functional tab is our Refinancing Calculator. Refinancing, if you don't know, is when you take one or more of your existing loans and you replace them with a brand new loan. So you can either take multiple loans and put it into one new loan with a single payment, or you can do individual loans. So let's say you have one really high interest loan for whatever reason, and you're able to refinance that at a lower rate. That might be attractive to you because you'll pay less interest. And that's really the main deciding factor here is you would consider refinancing when you think you can get a rate that's meaningful lower than what you're paying now. Now to use this calculator and to start this process, what you would do is you would check rates with different lenders so you can get a sense of what is available out there. And then your first step with using this calculator is to identify what loans you are considering for refinancing. So in this case, we're just going to select our private loans. So then we have our total balance here, our weighted average APR, and our combined minimum payment currently across those loans. The reason I'm not selecting federal loans in this case, and why you might be hesitant to as well, is that if you refinance federal loans, you give up access to things like IDR, public service loan forgiveness, and any other federal deferment or forbearance protections. So if you refinance those, you're no longer getting any of those federal benefits. So that's just something you really want to consider in your pros and cons list before refinancing anything federal. And then we have two other columns here that you can edit. So the first one is your current remaining balance. So this is going to take in the balance from our Create Your Plan tab. That's where we started. But if your current balance is lower, let's say you're looking at this calculator after you've been paying down your loan for a few months or a few years, you want to make sure you put your current balance in here. And then if your minimum payment has changed for whatever reason, you want to make sure that you update that here as well. And then for comparing our current status quo to a refinancing plan, we just need two other pieces of information. And the first is our new rate. So if we were to refinance, in this case, our 3 loans, what sort of rate would we be able to get? What have we been offered, or what are we seeing on the market? So let's say that we can get about 5%. So interest rates have gone down from when we took these loans out. So we can get down to 5%. That's great. And you will see different options for term. Term is the number of years. So in this case, let's say that we're going to do about 10 years. So we'll keep it about the same, but it can be more or less. A shorter time period will mean less interest payments, but more money up front. A longer time period will mean less money each month, but more money over the length of that new loan. Now, if we scroll down, we can see the results of our comparison. So we can see with our current loan, our total balance, our interest rate, our monthly payment, our total interest paid, and the total amount we would pay. So that's interest plus principal, just the total amount we would pay to pay off these loans if we don't refinance. And we have, what if we do refinance? So if we refinance at 5%, over 10 years, our monthly payment is going to decrease slightly. That's like a win right away. And then our interest paid will decrease pretty significantly because we have a lower rate. So our total paid will decrease also. So overall, if we refinance, we would expect to save about $8,000 in total, which is pretty great. So in this case, it might be worth refinancing because not only would we be paying less per month, we would also save more over the life of the loan. And rather than making individual payments across these loans, it would be packaged into one refinance loan with a single payment. And then down here, we have a dashboard that summarizes the difference. So that's our monthly savings, total interest saved, our debt-free date if we keep with the current loans, and then our debt-free date if we refinance. And then before moving forward with refinancing, I would definitely recommend going through these important considerations here. Again, the biggest one is if you're considering refinancing your federal loans, because you want to make sure that you fully understand whatever benefits you would be giving up by switching your federal loans to a refinanced loan. Now on to our last tab. Now, throughout this overview, I continue to reiterate that this is only for reference. It's only for planning and tracking, but it's not going to be totally precise. It's not going to cover every scenario. And over time, things will change. There will be new policies around IDRs and loan forgiveness and refinancing and all of that stuff. So how do you find out about that? Like, what is your single source of truth for these different things? There's no single source, unfortunately, but there are a few official sources, and I listed some of those here. These are ones that you should be able to trust, and they can tell you kind of different things. So if you want to dive deeper into this stuff and make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date, most accurate information, I would definitely recommend checking some of these websites out. And then I also have just some general tips and tricks and background information here that might be useful. So I would definitely recommend skimming through this and checking out some of these official websites. That concludes our overview of the Student Loan Planner and Tracker. I hope you found lots of useful information in this video, whether you have the workbook or not. If you don't have the workbook yet, just a reminder that you could find it in the link in the description below at buildwealth.tools. My name is Kev. I hope this helps you on your journey to debt freedom. You can get there sooner, and you can do it in a way that saves you money, and you can do it in a way that's low stress. And I hope this workbook and this video helps you do that. And I hope to see you again in the future as we discuss other personal finance tools. And you can find more videos and free spreadsheets on my YouTube channel, Build Wealth with Kev. Thank you. I'll see you later.